Hey, welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of talking to Elena Nuñez Murdock. Elena is an award-winning communications executive, angel investor, and board member at an EV and battery technology company. She has raised over $150 million for her clients, and her PR agency works with angel investors, upper middle market companies, venture capitalists, family offices, and their portfolio companies, scaling them to top-tier media placements and strategic partnerships. Elena is on a mission to inspire more women to be on boards and more active in philanthropy, and also to tell the stories of companies that are doing good work, because in her experience, the wrong companies get the lion's share of media attention, while the companies that are doing the good work receive little to no media attention because they lack the connections to share their story to the world. Elena, it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on.
I'm really excited. Every time we have a conversation, you always inspire new ideas and enthusiasm in me. So I think it'll be fun for our audience. I do want to dive into kind of your philosophy on business and how an individual can impact culture. I kind of want to get to that thinking first before we dive into all like the tactics or nuances.
Sure. So I'm a big believer in making massive impact and making moves in the area of business you're in. And the best way that I have done that has just been through really dialing in and what I'm passionate about. And that has always been board or being on a board. And I've had the opportunity to get on a board a couple of years ago. I'm on the board of Xeronox. And I think making an impact, like making a culture impact in somewhat the simplified way, is through board work, because you're able to make such massive strategy moves and massive impact in a way that you really can't at a more, working for a company versus being on a board. Not to take away from working for a company at all, because I have my own companies, but there's just such a unique way to impact culture and impact ecosystems through being on a board that you really can't do if you were just, I'm going to work this job and this job. And my passion is serving on boards, and that is the way forward. I think if we want to make a massive impact on our culture is today, not just in the United States, but internationally, the best way to do that is, because you can see like being on a board influences also politics and influences pretty much every sector of society today. And I think the most efficient way to do that is being on a board. Kind of like the most efficient way to give, in my opinion, is through a donor advised fund. Like the most efficient to make an impact. Most efficient way to make an impact is being on a board.
Interesting. Well, let's dive into both, because I've had different conversations with different guests on the pod, even around donor advised funds, so your DAFs and then your board work. I do want to maybe zoom out for a second. I had a gentleman, Grant Flannery, into the pod. I forgot which episode, but earlier he talks about how you can influence culture through branding. He's like a brand planner, brand strategist. And he talks about specifically how you can either connect and align with culture through your branding, or influence culture through branding. Obviously, when we say influence, we say this in a positive, influential way, but you're also kind of reaching that same end goal through board work. And it can feel, in my opinion, when I first heard you say this, it can feel kind of distant. Can you kind of help shorten the gap between how it's actually possible and maybe some ideas around what got you involved with board work and how you began that journey?
Yeah, I identified. So I started my company in 2017.
Yeah,
and I have worked with over 75 startups. And through working with startups and being involved in the venture capital ecosystem, in addition to growing up in the Stanford University community, which was amazing. My parents both went to Stanford Business School. My dad taught there. I learned a lot about startups, what moves them, the VC space, private equity. And I found that the decisions are being made for vast swaths of our culture, basically at the board level. And it seems like a far leap. And to me, when you're trying to get on your first board, it definitely is, man, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
A lot of it is networking and mentors. Like I have an incredible mentor. He's the head of Equinox Partners in New York. It's a major hedge fund. And he gave me a roadmap of how to get on a board. I would advise like studying pension funds and the more nuanced things of that. But in general terms, it's just about networking. And how I got on my first board was I had a client that I advised, and I helped a lot of his dreams come true. And then I had shared with him, and I was just honest. I think this is a great way also, just like lay your cards out on the table. One of my mentors, her name is Dr. Jeannie Kawaji. She's an MS, MBA, and PhD from Stanford, all from Stanford. And she's lay your cards out on the table and be honest and what do you want to achieve? And usually people will meet you and be like, oh, I can help you in this. I can help you in this. And so I did that with this client of mine. And I mentioned to him, like, it's a dream of mine to be on a board. And I've worked with startups and I've done these things. And I didn't really think about it again. And then about 6 months later, he was like, you've helped me achieve so much. I would like to introduce you to the CEO of Xeronox and the president of Xeronox. And I would like to nominate you for this board position. And I think you'd really be a really great asset to the company. And it was very simple. And actually, before that had happened, it was actually in 2020, like COVID. And I was like, well, this is probably not going to happen because I wasn't able to network with the people at Coca-Cola that I thought I was going to be able to network with. And I had just given up, honestly, to God. And I was like, maybe this isn't the thing that I was supposed to do. And I was like, I just released it totally. And less than a week later, I had this call from my client. And then I had another goal of mine was to be on the board of a university. And then 48 hours later from that call, I got an offer to be on the board of a university. So it's really amazing how God works. But I would say, like, laying your cards on the table, if you want to be a board member, lean into that and lean into the education. There's some amazing resources, the Private Directors Association and the NACD. Those places are great places to find mentors. So that's what I would really recommend. But it's really not, once you get on a board, getting on other boards is really just about networking and also about what have you achieved being on that board. So if you're working in the startup space, you're working in general corporate America, I would say leaning into the startup space and just getting involved. And one thing I also learned from another mentor is board work and like in every sector in terms of like nonprofit, for profit does matter. So I used to think that, oh, I'm on a nonprofit board, that doesn't matter as much. But really any board experience that you're an active board member and getting that governance experience does matter, which I think is really helpful and not really out there as much.
Interesting. No, I love that. And I mean, you had that desire and tenacity. So that's why that's fueling your avid networking. I'm curious to get your perspective too. I mean, sending this message to potentially other women founders, women who want to be on boards. I know like it's a low percentage. I have to do some research. Maybe it's like less than 30% of women on boards. Can you tell us about that? Because you're networking, you're competing at that level. I definitely want to like get your perspective, your lens on that.
It's interesting because I don't really think about that. I think about, which I know isn't quite answering your question, but I really just think about what are you most passionate about? And if you are passionate about being on a board, man or woman, leaning into that, I mean, there is that advantage. There are a lot of boards and there actually are a lot of investors who are looking at companies. And if there isn't a woman on that board, they're like turning it away. So there is a greater culture impact from the investor space, angel investors and VCs, private equity, that they are pushing that women founder or women board aspect. But I would say if you're a woman looking to be on a board, just be excellent in everything that you do, legit do good work, and that will be noticed. And if that is your desire to be on a board, find a mentor from anywhere. Like I would reach out, do research on somebody on LinkedIn, reach out to them, say like, hey, this is my passion. I really love governance. I love strategy. I love audit, whatever aspect of board governance you really love, get a mentor and just ask them a lot of questions. And like they can definitely introduce you to opportunities. I would say the Private Directors Association, there's a lot of really great opportunities through them. It's very low cost to join, very easy to find mentors. Everybody that I've connected to is extremely helpful, especially right now, at least the research I've done. I'm the youngest Latina in America to serve on the board of a private company, and I will be the youngest Latina in America to serve on the board of a publicly traded company, hopefully soon. So I just say if you're Latina, you have a lot of passion already, just the nature of our culture, and just make an impact. Just go for it. There's really no limits other than the ones that you place on yourself. And I would say too, what's interesting is I'm also unique because I don't have an MBA. I don't actually have a grad degree. I have taken grad classes at Stanford, but I ultimately didn't go and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the limits are just like what you place on yourself. Because I was told by mentors in general, you're never going to get on board unless you have an MBA degree, you have some sort of finance degree.
Really?
But I've worked in M&A and I've worked in the PR. Like I own a PR agency and I've worked a lot in exits and worked for public companies. And you can leverage, and like our culture is so unique now and like the ecosystem so that you can be anything that you want to be. And so don't place limits on yourself, because the only thing preventing you from doing something, in my opinion, in my experience, is yourself.
Let's dive into that in just a second. But oh my gosh, one of the things that you did mention that I do want to like expand upon before we dive into a few other key points, you keep unpacking so much, of a friend. He's in the podcast world and he takes people who want to become known for something. And he's come up with a very interesting statistic. Obviously, it's the data set needs to be larger for this to be like a holistic thing, but it's a good insight for us to garner. Is what he helps, he does the podcast, he helps people post on social like 365 days out of the year. And what he found is that quote unquote newbie who wants to be known for a very specific topic and starts interviewing people around that topic, it took that person around 20 weeks or so to flip the script, where now people are coming to him for advice on that specific topic. And I think it goes to your point saying you can do or be what you choose to be, regardless of what you believe about yourself or your circumstance. And I just found that fascinating. That is so true, that the thought leaders or influencers that we see this, they did not go to school to do that. They just stumbled upon it. Can you kind of dive into that too? Like your views on choosing the right path for yourself, and then also just leaning in and not being afraid of like imposter syndrome, or I don't know, because I didn't study this in school. Like how is like what you're seeing right now affect the trajectory of our future?
I think what we studied in school doesn't need to define you. I studied theology at a Catholic university, was in youth ministry for 3 years in Miami, and then left that and to start my own business, and then work with 75 startups and have worked with incredible companies, public and private.
Yeah.
I was definitely very blessed to grow up in the Stanford, Silicon Valley community. And so I definitely grew up with the mindset of you can do anything and you're supposed to make a massive impact.
Yeah.
Regardless of what other people. So I don't think that it matters a lot, especially like in today's day and age where like Elon Musk is saying, I'm not going to hire people with degrees as much. So you can see like in culture, like there are massive employers who are not necessarily making that decision based on what you have. I mean, definitely have a degree, but you can learn so many skills that take you into a variety of paths. It really is up to you. And that's what I found about my journey. And I leveraged the fact definitely that I grew up in Silicon Valley, not as much. Now we have an outstanding portfolio for our agency and started a couple of companies. I'm an angel investor, I'm a producer, board member. So and now a columnist for Grit Daily. So you can really do anything. And that's another thing too, is like, I never saw myself as a writer, but I've known the founder, Jordan French, for a couple of years, and he had asked me to write a column before, and I kind of was like, I'm not a writer, and this opportunity came up again, and I was just like, sure, I'll do it, why not? And just because I think I definitely struggle with imposter syndrome, and I think everybody does. I've worked with a lot of, especially venture capitalists who have written about it, and that's just something that, like, yes, I think everybody's scared at some point, but you just have to overcome it, and you just have to make a way or find a way or make one. Is something I like to live by. It's move like water. There are going to be so many different circumstances and so many different opportunities, and you can take all of them and you can make a massive impact, or you can be scared and then not shine your light. And what are you going to choose? You only have one life.
Everything you're saying is like quotable right now. I love it. Find a way or make one and move like water. And you do have one life. You also mentioned that the belief is you can be anything you want to be. I think that's an important belief that we either are dissuaded or harmed mentally as we grow up and we start learning that we might be wrong or et cetera. But then the other belief that I think I want to dive into is that you're supposed to make a massive impact. It's almost like a social responsibility at that point, or can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I believe we were created to make an impact, and everybody has such unique gifts and talents. And so what we're supposed to do according to what degree we got is not really applicable in today's day and age. I do believe from a God's perspective that, we were uniquely created for a specific purpose. What that purpose is can be multidimensional and doesn't have to be one thing. It's definitely not one thing for me. And if we're not taking responsibility for learning, and we should always be learning. We should always be learning things from other people. If you think that you have the opinion, I graduated from Stanford or Harvard or IMD or Harvard, I'm like, I'm done learning. That's a really antiquated way of thinking.
Yeah.
Like, we're always responsible for learning new things and bringing that education, the things that we have learned, to people who don't know those things. Like, I'm going through this process of being involved with a SPAC, and I've been talking to some of my mentors, and they've never been through a SPAC. And so I have a duty to share that information. They're dealing with private companies as well, and like, people who are going through SPACs. What are the best practices for SPAC? Nobody is talking about SPACs, for example, and best practices. Like, we've seen in the last couple of years, SPACs when the stock price is cratering. Why is that happening? Nobody's talking about that. And I've done an analysis, and I'm very passionate about, let's not let our company be that statistic. So if you have that education and you have that knowledge, you have a duty to make that impact. What good is that if you keep it to yourself and that's not improving the world and that's not helping your company grow, whether you're on a board or not? Like, you do have that duty to share that. And so I've been, I guess, pretty young. It's so important to educate yourself and to share that.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I found personally was that I personally love to read a ton of books. Like, I'll chew them like I chew gum or eat chocolates. Like, I don't eat as much chocolates nowadays, but it's like another day, another book, stuff like that. But then it got to me at the point where I understood like human need psychology and like, why do I desire to learn more versus always take action on it? It's once I started flipping the script and saying, okay, I'm going to learn something, then I'm going to do something about it, putting it into practice. But
I need to get Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think what you're saying is even a higher calling too, is that if you have knowledge that could support or serve others in a greater way, like it's almost irresponsible to not put it out there, to not give your perspective on it, or to create change because of it.
Yes, I totally agree. I was just gonna say that I need to get better at reading books. I'm actually not great at it, and a lot of my mentors are like, "You need to read a book like a week." But the way that I learn has always been through doing and being involved in that thing. For example, I'm on the advisory board of the Catholic Community Foundation of Los Angeles. It's the fastest growing community foundation in the country. And the way that I got on that advisory board, and there wasn't really an advisory board up to that point, I think there was a small one. And I was like, hey, I love donor advised funds. Mm-hmm. I really want to make an impact. I know my friends have the ability to give, but they're not. Like, can I just be on a board? And I just said, hey, put me on something. And they put me on something. So a lot of that time, if there's opportunities, you can definitely find a board position through LinkedIn, through networking. But a lot of it is like going up to someone and being like, I can provide this and this. Let me do it for you. And people are like, yeah, thank you for asking.
Interesting. No, I love that. And I think with the books, like I just listen to a bunch of books and a lot of education that way. It's like during walks or workouts and stuff like that. But I think even getting involved and pushing yourself to that limit towards you actually have to learn something to apply that. I think that's also the best way of learning, that where you can apply it immediately. So how does everything that you're doing, because one of the key things that you mentioned and that we didn't actually touch on is that you know your story. You were like, I was doing research and I'm the youngest Latina to serve on a board or a publicly traded board. And like, you're finding ways to share your story in a unique way, not in a way to be, in my opinion, boastful, but in a way for you to highlight, hey, what I'm doing is special, but also for everyone listening right now, what is it that you're doing that makes your story so unique? Because it is unique, and being able to identify that. Is that why you're passionate about doing the PR? Or tell me more about how your passions mix to the work that you're doing in the business that you run.
Yeah, so I have always been, like what I said earlier, I have always been that person to find a way or make one and blazing a trail. And a lot of that does actually come from my mom. She was one of very few women to be in her MBA class at Stanford in the 90s. And she was an incredible worker. I'm a first gen. She came from here from Nicaragua, and my dad is American, Chicago. But I learned a lot of hard work through that. And it is unique, not because I strive to be necessarily unique, although I do leverage the youngest and the Latina, because there isn't anyone else doing that at this point. And there's also a lot of Latinas who could be making a tremendous impact, but they don't have like somebody to be like, hey, this stuff is possible. I think I kind of fell into PR. I didn't actually study it, as I mentioned before. Yeah. It's something that totally happened by accident. I got a client. I used to do LinkedIn strategy for CEOs, and I happened to get this client featured in LinkedIn News. And I was like, how on earth do I replicate this? And just dove into that, realized that PR was a thing, public relations was a thing, pitching. I got just a lot of really great mentors and really leaned into that and built my portfolio. I was living in LA at the time, was flying up to Silicon Valley and just going to startup events and just like hey, I'll do for $500 at this time, I'll do this, and just grinding and building my portfolio that way. And then from there, I started working with VCs. My dad was the chairman of a private equity firm, so I have that expertise and that background, so I know the lingo. Mm-hmm. And I was able to get clients that way. And so it just kind of happened. People like that, like, oh my God, did you study communications? But like, no, I didn't at all, actually. But that was actually better because I was not molded to a certain, this is what one does to get stories. And so I was able to create my own pitches. And then I was able to scale, and now we uniquely only hire former journalists and former executive editors to do the day-to-day pitching thing. I really focus on closing the clients. I focus on my board work, the investing, whatnot. So I really focus on, and we do focus on unique stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that eye for it, but it's not like I was like, oh, I'm going to be this unique person. I just like, how do I survive when you're starting your own company? Like, how do you survive? And then how do you scale? And then how do you thrive? And how do you make an impact and help others scale, thrive, grow? And that's what I love about being an angel investor and being a board member, is advising and helping companies grow, helping founders grow. It's something that I really love to do.
No, so it's really interesting. And the key thing here to take away too is that right now we all have opportunities to leverage or resources or connections that we may not be looking at in the right lens, or may have not even seen. Sometimes it's one of those invisible objects in front of us, or invisible leverage points. I mean, for you, it was the education, like on capitalism, VC, et cetera, and the network that you had. But I think for us and everyone else like listening to this, it's also, what else are we not seeing that we can leverage to either compound to our growth with others? And I think that's always an important to ask, because we might not have the right lenses on all the time, or not have the right thinking cap on. I think it sounds to me like, I'd be curious to know if you, once you got over that belief that you're not a writer, it sounds to me like you have some sort of framework or some sort of, I don't know, methodology. Do you have a book in you?
I've been asked that quite a bit. I might. I don't know. I really am not a writer, but I'm trying my hand. I have 2 articles. I have to do 2 articles a month with Grit Daily. I'm just waiting. So who knows? But at least I'm going to dive into the columnist situation for now, and then maybe in 20 years.
20 years? Come on.
Maybe.
I think you got a book in 20 months.
I don't know about that.
They say, I mean, there's different strategies to write. You can be on a Zoom call like this, and you can, let's say you're doing like an interview series, you can literally have that transcribed. Then you can have those questions edited, and then you can.
I think the reason I say 20 years though is that right now, like I talked to you, I think not even a month ago, and then like in that month and a half or so that I haven't talked to you, a podcast series I invested in was picked up by NBC Dateline, and so many things have happened, and now we're about to go through a SPAC, hopefully, and so many things have been added. So if I started writing a book, it would be constant revisions. So I feel like looking back, I'd be like giving advice to Latinas or young people in 20 years, I think would be a better way to do it. At that time, probably things will be changing too. But right now, there's just so many things have happened in just a year. And 2022 was tough, and COVID stuff was tough. But things are ever changing, and it's just like mind blowing how fast everything is going.
Yeah, which is why you need a series. It can't just be one.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Yeah. It's just a little push, a little friendly push there. Well, Elena, I think you always expand my thinking. It's always really encouraging to hear you and the way that you think and your excitement and enthusiasm. What would you say right now to everyone listening? And like, they're either in their 9 to 5, they're going in, they're looking at the window, starting that startup, doing that side hustle, or they're in the grind right now. They're building, they're growing, they're optimizing. They're trying to find new ways to add value to their team, to the marketplace. What are some of the, I don't know, a few key things that you would say, hey, maybe consider this?
I would say if you're looking to be an entrepreneur, you really have to love failure. Like you really have to love wanting to be negative. Like I had a client who was a negative millionaire at one point, and now he has his net worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But you have to be willing to go through that. Yeah, like in theory, you can be like, oh yeah, I can totally handle that. But like when you are the one owing, or your company is the one owing, are you in the depths of failure? Are you loving every second of it? And are you embracing that? And if you're not ready to do that, or not willing to do that, or like you need the benefits, or you need whichever, I mean, I definitely wish I had benefits starting out. You really have to love and embrace the failure. And I don't think that people talk about failure, but not about embracing failure, because until you really failed and really been at that brink, can you really turn that around, or can you turn that around? Because not everybody can.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. Like I definitely have really great mentors who are really high in corporate America, but they really excel being corporate America. And so, yes, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I definitely have freedom. I only work about 4 days a week, but in those 4 days, I work 12, 15 hours. And then Mondays and Tuesdays, I take time to like work out or whatever. But yes, you do get freedom eventually. But like the first 10 years, I've heard, I'm in my 6th year, it's really hard.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So if you're thinking about it, like you got to really love the failure. And I don't think that's emphasized enough. Yes, there are a ton of benefits there, but that you shouldn't look at the benefits. You should look at the cons, and do you really love those cons?
Yeah, I think 2 things that come to mind there. I mean, just to add to your point is that one, I think any goal can be accomplished, but you need to look at the costs that will come with it, like the sacrifices that are necessary to accomplish that goal. And I think I mean, take it or not take it. I'm not the biggest fan of Napoleon Hill, but there is something important that I think that he said is that failure is a prerequisite to success. It's either that or Benjamin Franklin, but it's when you see it at that point and you see it as, hey, this is a stepping stone to success, it changes your anticipation of it. And it's a feedback loop too. And it's how you go through that. It's kind of crazy to think about even my personal entrepreneurship journey starting in I started trying to create offers and businesses failing pretty hard on my teeth, I think in 2011, 2012, right? So if you're going to start now, because what's going to happen is that the years are going to go by and it's still going to go by if you start or don't start, right? If you want to do the whole 10-year thing and 10 years of failure or whatever, I mean, usually it's 5, it's not a prerequisite number. But if the time is going to pass anyways, and it's something you want to do, might as well get the counter started now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But if you're looking to make an impact, I don't think there is a better way than entrepreneurship. Also, I mean, being on board, definitely more so. But you're able to control just a lot more in your circle versus being dictated to by essentially scheduling. Yes, I have meetings, I have a ton of meetings, but at the end of the day, you're the one taking control of that versus like you being told to take meetings. For example, my schedule, I try not to take meetings before 10 a.m., not because I'm sleeping in by any means, but because I'm really like prioritizing my time and how am I going to further what I need to get done for my clients. Deep work.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we scheduled this call after 11 a.m. for a reason, both you and I. No, I love that. And actually, this brings up a second question, if you don't mind, just before we close, is where do you see the future when it comes to, I mean, there are individuals and our temperaments and characteristics that don't want to do the entrepreneurs. That's completely fine. That's fine. But where do you see actually the future of free enterprise ownership, how the future workforce might look like? Are people going to have a lot of solopreneurs and fractional work that way? Or what are you seeing?
I actually don't know a lot of solopreneurs. I worked, like I said, a lot with portfolio companies, but now I work with a lot of family offices and their portfolio companies. So I'm not seeing that as much. I think like the wantrepreneurs, I think that, especially as we head into this supposed recession cycle that's coming up, which has massive opportunities, by the way. Like I'm writing an article on this. And there's massive opportunity to be had. Just don't let that scare you. If you want to embrace that, embrace it.
Well, why'd you say supposed?
That's going to, there's clearly an agenda, in my opinion, in the media. There's a lot of things being pushed. I'm sure it'll happen, but like to what gravity and like what extent, nobody really knows. Nobody can tell the future. There's definitely an agenda to drive certain markets and certain stocks. So you have to be aware of that. There is an agenda for sure. But I think going into a harder time, there's massive opportunity. The most amount of millionaires are always made in hard times, and it'll cycle out those solopreneurs who want to be like legit business owners, but are like, oh, I'm kind of doing this to have free time. So it'll cycle and kind of eliminate those people. And then going into it, like if you really want to work hard and you really want to make an impact and you want to make good money, which I think as individuals wanting to make massive impact, we have a duty to make a lot of money so we can give back in massive ways. Then this is the time like for you. Like we're really entering that point. It's honestly easy, in my opinion, having raised over 150 million for our clients over the last 6 years. Like it's easier to raise $1 million to 10 million in harder economic cycles, in my experience.
Wow.
I know a lot of people will say that's not the case. Versus if you are raising under $1 million, then people said that you're desperate.
Really?
So
wow.
I think there's always opportunity. It's just like, how are you positioning yourself? What are the right partners? Who are your mentors? Getting in the right like market opportunity. There's always positive cash flow for the good ideas. But it has to be a good idea that's marketable and it's sustainable, not in the green, well, not necessarily in the green sustainable way, but like actual like scalable versus, oh, I have this idea and people should just give me money, which is what you see with the crazy valuations.
Oh yeah.
So I think the crazy valuations will fall, but in terms of what kind of opportunities out there, that'll increase. But it will be like very targeted. You'll see like new Amazons popping up, new Facebook type of companies. So I think the solopreneurs will fall by the wayside unless they really want to be like making a massive impact. And it's not just about making money, which is good, but also how are they making an impact on the world?
Yeah, going beyond that. Interesting. This is like the training. Like this is what we've trained for pretty much. It's the big competition or the big fight or the big event. And it's interesting when you frame it that way. No, I love that. But for Elena, for all of our listeners out there, what's the best place for one, people to thank you for being on and two, learn a little bit more about what you're up to?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best place. That's really the most active social platform for me.
Okay, cool. I'll put the link to your social. Elena, thank you so much for being generous with your time and sharing your insights and wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.